Hello and welcome to. Today we're going to have a look at FlexBox or Flexible Box. In this tutorial we're going to be referring to it as FlexBox though. So what is FlexBox? Let's just jump into it. It is a new layout mode in CSS3, and you might be asking, why do I need a new layout mode? Well, if you've done any sort of layouting in HTML and CSS in the past, you would probably be very familiar with some of the headaches around it, like centering things or how to get things to align properly when you're resizing your browser and so on. So how is FlexBox going to do this? Well, it's going to get rid of your floats and your display block elements, and it's going to be doing it in its own new mode. So instead of the old model, it's now going to be using a display flex model instead. So we got a new layout mode called display flex, and another improvement with it as well will be your containers margins, where you usually have your content in. The margin won't be collapsing with the margins of its content, as we're going to be seeing in this tutorial. Just a little note on browser compatibility. FlexBox doesn't work in IE9, so if you're going to be doing any sort of development targeting older browsers, you should go with the traditional block model rather than the new Flex one. So let's get started. Alright, so we've got brackets open here, and we've got a browser open over here. So let's just go over the documents we have. We've got one called styles CSS, containing all the styles, and then we've got one called FlexBox HTML. Inside this one, we've got a pretty basic structure. We've got a container, and we've got some children, which are articles. So a container is the line you see up here, and the children inside are these that's colored. So if you're gonna do that yourself, I suggest you use more a semantic approach and target the articles instead of giving in classes here. You don't need to do that. However, just for the purposes of this tutorial, so we know what we're talking about here, we have given the class of child instead. So inside of styles, we then have these classes. You see flex child. So these are the ones. And down here, we basically just got a bit of coloring and our container here, which is just the solid line around it. So one other thing just to mention before going any further is that up here you will notice the HTML got a font size 16, and that's not just for giving all our children a font size to inherit, it's also for the sort of new rim based system. And if you don't know about rims yet, well, basically what it is that you define a font size on your root element, and that size is used throughout your styles. So what do I mean by this? Well, it means that if you have anything inherited from that, is that you can use rim to sort of say, I want this to be 32 pixels. So how do you do that? Well, you can say one rim is equal to 16. So 32, well, that would be 2 rim. So 2 times 16 is 32. That's sort of the way you get it. So say, what have I done here? I've done 0.2 rem. What does that mean then? Well, it means that's 20% of the 16 where we defined up here. So 20% of 16 would be 3.2. So if I went in here and typed 3.2 pixel, you'll notice there's absolutely no different from before. So, well, that might seem a bit pointless, but it's not, well, because what it allows you to do is, if you're doing anything responsive, is to say, I want it to be on mobile or something like that, this size. You see, the whole layout changes, so even your borders or whatever, where you used your rims, it changes the size depending on what you have defined on the root element down here. So we're going to be doing our styles in here instead of in the CSS document, just to keep it a bit separate. So we've got our overall styling in the CSS document. However, let's just talk about the previous way of displaying things. So if you notice over here, these elements, they're dropping down on different lines, and that's just the default behavior. We haven't done anything with Flex yet. So if I inspect this, you'll notice down here, if I click one of the chart, you will notice that we're going to say display block. Second, I was to click there. See, we got display block. So this is a block element, and what the block element does is it drops down on the next line. So you're probably familiar with similar display modes like display inline, where we have an inline and so on. So if we want this display mode to be changed to flex mode, what we need to do is we need to have a container that acts as the parent, and then we need children inside it, and those immediate children, so the first in here, are the ones that are gonna get affected. So you're not gonna have these affected in here by this mode, but you're gonna have this affected. So what we do is we're gonna change the display mode of this one to flex. And you notice when that happens, we're no longer gonna have these block elements that separate down to different lines. It also has a different mode, so you notice the container around here is currently very much behaving like a block element in itself. However, I could do inline, and you notice that it's gonna wrap. See that? Very much like the block elements used to do. You also notice that there's no padding or any margin in between these. The margin we have around here is actually from our CSS. So we look at it here, and here we have the 0.2 rem defined, but between there there's none. So if I was to remove that, this would be all snuck together. So let's just go back to our FlexBox here. One thing you may notice up here, I have this one just in case you want to know about it, because that's no new things available too. If you ever have created a language specific website, you may have run into the issue of this. It's quite difficult actually to write something that reads from the right to left instead of left to right. So luckily there's actually a new feature available. You know that we're now reading from the other direction, and that is how easy it is to change. And you can obviously do the default behavior like this, like that. So let's just get rid of that. That's it. Once you enable flex, we can start working with the children inside the flex container. So one of the first options available to us with flex is the layout of the elements inside, and we can either do that in sort of like a row, or we can do it in a column. And it also allows us to change the direction of these items, as you will notice with the numbers. So it's called flex direction, like that. And we see we've got column, column reverse, and row reverse. So if I do column here, save that, what happens is that it's the sort of like a container is acting like the column here. So if I was going to row, we get a row with the items in. So do like that. See, we now have this row, that's the default one we had before. So what about the reverse? Well, imagine a situation where you wanted number 8 to be the first item, for example on a mobile display or something. I don't know what your scenario would be, but we could do row reverse and we would get 8 over there. So what happens is got 8, 7, 6 and so on, but what really happens is it starts from the other side. So it goes 1, 2, 3 from the right side rather than the left side. And in similar way with the column, if we could do column like that, we got 8, 7 and so on. So that's flex direction. This then brings us on to the next option available to us. That will be flex wrap. So it's quite depending on the flex direction, they sort of affect each other. So what do I mean by flex wrap? Well, when I say flex wrap, it's targeting the children inside your flex container, and it determines how they're gonna behave. Are they gonna be on one line, or are they gonna be on multiple lines? So at the moment you see that it's trying to squeeze them on onto one line here. So if I went and did like this, flex wrap, and said no wrap, it means they're not meant to wrap now. And I then did this like that. So that's the behavior of no wrap. It's not trying to push them onto multiple lines. No wrap, it's trying to be just on the same line. However, if I was trying to wrap it, what you will see that these elements would be pushed onto another line. So they're trying to wrap onto multiple lines. Sorry, see that? I've got multiple lines there now. So similar as before, there's also a reverse option available to us, like that. And you see how it does it differently from the other side this time. Alright, so that might not seem that obvious. However, if we were gonna go in and actually give these individual children a size, you see something quite different. So if I went in here and did something like, say, get it 30%. So our children are 30. So what you will notice is that we now got wrap reverse on. So it's trying to wrap it onto multiple lines and keep that 30% width like that. However, if I was gonna say no wrap, notice what it does to the width. It's gonna force them all onto one line as much as possible based on the content here, and then it's gonna basically completely ignore of 30% width. It's no different there. So similar if I was to do this, it's trying to squeeze it on there. So keep that in mind when you're doing that. One other thing you're gonna notice how it wraps is that even though we set 30% here, each of these would be way over 100%. So it's still managing to put it into the same container or flex container without stepping outside the container. So the problems you had in like a past where you're trying to fit something in and your content inside is too big and it's going outside the container and then messing up your layout, you don't have that. It's just not allowing it to actually bypass it. So that's quite nice. So what about direction? Well, we now got this on. So if we were gonna say wrap again, get them onto the different lines, you notice that these elements now can be controlled with the flex wrap like this. So we can do like that, or we can do row reverse like that. So we start down from we start from this corner and we go down. If I then was to go to reverse wrap that, you notice how we start down from this corner and up. So that's how you control that. So play around a bit to get a hang of that, so you know exactly when you want something to start down from this corner, or you want to start up from that corner, up from that corner, and how you want your elements to be laid out in which order. Flex does come with another way of actually ordering in the elements, as we're going to see in later in this tutorial. So let's just go on to the next part. One thing to note though, when I said that it sort of completely ignores that, it doesn't completely ignore that when you have it on no wrap. What it means is that if there's more items than there's room for, it will start pushing them together. So for example, if you only had 2 here with no wrap, they would display some similar like that. So let me show you what I mean. So if I did no wrap like that, and I then got rid of some of these items, so it would only be 60 pixels wide like that, you then have like this sort of thing. So it's not gonna make it expanded to fit it, but it's gonna say in case you have too much width on these items or margin for it to fit in here, it's gonna push them together to fit onto that line. Alright, so the next thing that's up is justify content. So that has a few properties. You will notice that what we've been doing before is sort of been working with each individual ones as we've been moving around. However, what justify content does, it's sort of working with it more as the group. So if I'm just going to get rid of this and I want this to just be wrap like this, still wrap there. So I got that, and then instead of 30, I want it to be 6 rem. Yeah. All right. So justify content will be on your container as well. There. And the properties available are center, flex end, flex start, which is your default. So we now have the content starting from here, but we're talking about pretty much the whole of it now. So let's just see, if you flex start, it shouldn't change, and it doesn't. However, with the flex end, you kind of imagine it's taking all the content and moving it to the end. If I do like that, so sort of take the whole group. So what's really nice about this is if you're ever trying to actually center something, it's really easy. With flex, all you do is justify content center, and there we go. And we're not just centered one thing, it's centered the whole group here. So we don't have to do any ugly hacks by doing like a margin auto and so on. Just simple as this. We got a few more available as well, which quite interesting ones, I suppose. So there's one that's called space around. What's that gonna do? It's gonna look at the margin, or the person's gonna look at the width of the item and then create the margin based on that. So we do that. So what you see here is it's gonna be half here, and then it's gonna be half there and half on this one. So imagine it's sort of like it adds a bit of margin on each side, which is equal to 2 times of what it does there and 2 times of what it does on the other side. What you also notice is that it's trying to force all the children onto one line, and what happens in the bottom here is that it takes still, so this is the 50%, and then you got it there and there, so there's 150 and 50% there, if that makes sense. So if that would be 50 pixels, this would be 100 pixels, and that would be 50 pixels. If you then look at the space between, like that, it's going to push each child out to the end, and then it's going to space the elements depending on how much space overall is. So it would say if there was 20 pixels left space between these, it would then divide those up into these columns and give it a margin there. And the same as you see here down in the bottom, this is the space between that's left, and it's going to be split up in that. So that's quite interesting. But you're probably going to find that center very, very useful, because it's so easy to center content like that. Simple as this. Alright. What you may have noticed here is that we've been working in the x-axis. So we've been aligning things in a horizontal way. So we've done that, so we got in the center horizontally. But what if we want to do it in the y-axis? Well, there is an option for that, and that's called align items. So the properties here are baseline, center, and start and end. So the default one is actually stretch, and for you to understand stretch, we need to just change the HTML or CSS for the HTML a bit here, because the ones you see as flex children here is actually inside another div, so you see down there. So the actual flex child is not the one that has the color. So let me just give it a bit of color here, just for the purpose of showing you. So these are our actual flex children. Before, they've just been wrapping to the content inside. So for us to align it in other axis, we need to give the container a height. And we do that by just giving it 20 rem or something like that. What you will notice here, the default behavior with stretch is that it takes the child and try to stretch what is left. So you got a different one and trying to stretch it to match up. So you get that 50%, 50% if you ignore the 5 pixel margin here. So that stretch is going to stretch it. If I was to make that longer, what would happen? It would just stretch these children even further. So that's it. However, what is interesting though is if you start looking at other ones, say you wanted to flex start, you will notice the height changes, but it goes up to here. We now have it arranged up there. If I was going down to the end, we should see it going down the bottom like that. And then obviously probably the most useful one, flex center. So now we have these aligned exactly in the middle. So if I just remove the pixel there, and I can then go up here and say center. And that's the way you would align things right in the middle. So now it's both an x-axis and the y-axis. They also got a different one called baseline. So it's now going to try to align to the baseline of the content, or sorry, of the child's height. So now they're the same height. But you notice once we get to other ones where you can specify specific onto the which child, you can align it on the baseline, or you can align it to the start and so on. So you can get them different heights. So the baseline is actually the flex child's size inside the baseline of the size. Alright, so don't worry about that. We'll get to that in a little bit. We'll just make it a bit more clear. Actually, before we move on, let's just clarify it a bit more this one, because it's quite a difficult to explain. It sort of works on the baseline of the text. So if we go down here, and I was to increase the size of the text, you have the baseline down here in the x-axis. So if I was to do style and then change the font size of this, and we now have it on the baseline up there. So if we change it to 45 pixel, you will notice that all the elements are aligning on the same line, which is here, but the container is bigger. However, it is aligning to the text here. So if I was to change this one up here to flex start, we're now aligning it based on the containers again up here. So that's it. It's aligning it to the text baseline. Next up, we got align content. To make this a bit clear, we're just gonna get rid of some of the padding and the margins on these. So at the moment, it's not controlled to the edge, and that was why you haven't seen it go to this in the beginning there. So we just did that. Right, so that's the text, and then we want to remove all the margin in here as well, and padding. Like that. Nope. Alright, so you now see it goes all the way to the top. It's wrapping right to the content. So before, when we were talking about align items, we're getting a lot of different aligns now, but think about align items as each individual item. So where each individual item was wrapped to it, it's sort of taking the whole of the group and aligning it based on that. So if you say align center, you see it aligning together here, whereas the items, we're going to put it onto 2 lines and align it in the center based on how many items you have going over the different lines. Like, so when it's wrapping over multiple lines, it's gonna do it like this and sort of set them based on that. So what does that mean? Well, it means like that the align content is sort of like a multi-line one to work with. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you were gonna have one line and you used align content, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't do anything. So for example, if I was to reduce the width to 1 like that, I'm gonna align content here now, coming, it's just gonna do anything. So it's not gonna align it. So keep it in mind, it works over multiple lines. So let's just change that back to, and like the other one, we have the still another, we can do flex start, flex end, and so on to align this group based on that. So that's align content. So what we've been working with so far is properties on the parent element, the container, the cells flex container. So while that's all good, flex also actually provide you full control over each child if you need that. So let's look at the first one. That would be your order. So you notice we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here. However, through flex we can actually move these items around as we please. So let's just target the child, and we're going to take the second child here. So it's going to be number 2, and you will notice we're not giving an order of 1. It's going to go to the end. So it's not going to be a beginning. That's because it's not working 1, 2, 3, 4 in sort of this sense. It's more relative to the other numbers. So since we haven't defined anything, you're going to see there's a 0. So 1 is higher than 0, and thus it's going to appear later on than the previous element. So let me demonstrate this. If I was to take the third element and give it 1 as well, we're going to get it pushed to the end as well. However, if I was going to give it -1, you would see it appear in the beginning. So what about the first one? Well, let's grab the first one and give it -1, 2, like that. So we have that there, the first one, -1, 2. Alright, so what if I wanted to change this to, say, -2? Nothing changes, because that is the lower number than 3. However, if I wanted something to appear between these two now, say I wanted number 5 to be between these, I could go and say want number 5, and I want it to be between these two, so I could say -3 and -2, and you will now see this one appearing right there in between. So that's how you control it. So they're relative to the other numbers you've given it, and if you haven't given it a number, 1 is obviously going to be higher than the default value, and -1 is going to be lower than the default value. So that's how that works. Alright, so I just tidied up the project a bit here. So now we've got 4 items instead of 8, and we got rid of some of these child classes. So the next property for the childs are the flex shrink. And what that does is it shrinks is based on a number, and that number is sort of like a multiplier, how much it needs to shrink. So for example, let's say instead of, we got 50 pixel up here, let's just give it 3 rem. This might be a bit too small. Let's just increase it to 5. Alright, so if we give all the classes a flex shrink of 1, on that, they're now gonna shrink equally once it gets too small for them. So if I was gonna give it a flex shrink for the second one of 2, it's gonna shrink twice as much. So what does that mean? Well, it's fine now, and that's what I'm doing this to show you, is that it only happens when it's necessary to shrink. So when there's enough space, this is not gonna work or take effect as it is. So if I was to increase this one 15, you will notice that this container goes to there, this container goes to there, but number 2 doesn't shrink as much as the other ones, and I can increase the power of that one, do it like that, and it shrinks even further. In similar fashion, we also got a grow. So when there's room for growing, so to grow here, so that's basically the opposite. And if I was to lower this one to 5, you notice that this one is growing 4 times over the other ones are, or twice. So that's twice as big as the other one. So let's shrink and let's grow. Next up, we got flex spaces, and it's sort of a weird one. It's sort of like a width and a height depending on which flex direction you're using. So let me demonstrate this. So if you were to say, let's just go make this, let's make the items flex spaces down here, and then let's give it 25%. So this will apply to the width of it. So we now got 25%, and this is before any space is calculated. So we'd apply the space and say it needs to be 25 before working out any of the width. So same if I did 25 pixels, it would make that before looking at a space. However, the interesting part is if you were to change the direction of this, the width would become the height. So let's demonstrate this. So if you did like a column there, you notice here the height, and that's because, let's just give the background color off, like that. So that's a height, and then we've got a little container inside a FlexBox. Alright, the last child property we're going to be looking at is align self, and earlier we aligned all the items in the middle. We can get even more control over individual items, or we can override the previously defined alignment for them. So let's first put these in the middle again, just to make an example. So if we do align items here, and let's do in the center. If we then go down here and target the second child, get that one from before to us align self here, what's going to happen here is we're going to first align these in the middle, and then we're going to align the second item at the bottom. So there you go. If we then wanted to take the third item and say we want to align that, maybe we want to align that in the beginning and in the top. So there you have it. That's how you can move the items around. And the other options are baseline, center, and stretch. So we had stretch before, which is basically just stretching it. So if I was to, which is the default behavior, if I was to do the background color here, and change this to, for example, L, you see that one is now stretching. So I think that's pretty much everything for FlexBox. It's probably going to take a bit getting used to, but it does have a lot of convenient features with aligning things and avoiding things overflowing and so on. So it's definitely an improvement when it comes to building responsive websites. So yeah, I think that's it, guys. In the next tutorials, we're going to be looking at how this works with Bootstrap 4, because Bootstrap 4 is actually going to allow you to take advantage of Flex. It's got a variable you can change, so we're going to be looking at that and probably working with it with SAS. And yeah, don't forget to check out the website and subscribe and like. Thank you very much, guys.